Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on sustainable agriculture. This is our 564th episode. We have our world famous speakers, Dr. Talib Raphael, Mr. David Schumacher, Mr. David Smith, Mr. Rob, and we have our young talented pool from Malaysia, Amanda. Thank you for joining. And Mr. Saleh from Bangladesh. First, I would like
Can't
to
hear
give
you. I
chance.
can't hear you, Sharif. Can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me, sir?
I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we hear you too.
Okay. I want to give chance Mr. David Schumacher.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Sustainable agriculture. Well, you probably know where I like to go. I like to start off with the definition so we all know what we're talking about, at least have the same idea. Sustainable architecture, or excuse me, sustainable agriculture. See, I need to know what I'm talking about. It's actually defined by law in the United States. Title 7 of the U.S. Code says that it's an integrated system of plant and animal production that has that's meant to satisfy human and fiber needs, enhance environmental quality, efficient use of non-renewable and on-farm resources, sustain viable farm operations, and essentially make things wonderful and better. That's a high-level reading of Title 7. The point is that, and maybe more simply, like the goal of sustainable architecture is to meet society's needs in the present without sacrificing or compromising the future in agriculture. And that last, more simple explanation is from the University of California, Davis, which is the #1 agricultural school in the United States and one of the best in the world. So there's a lot of people that put a lot of focus on this, much more than we can do in an hour here. But I want to take the approach today of looking at what we can do today in sustainable architecture, and I'm going to come at it from the place of innovation, which is, of course, one of my common themes too. What can we do to be more efficient? Today, if we're more efficient, we can conserve those resources that we need for the future and monitor them in such ways that they can be used for an incredibly long period of time. And speaking of monitoring, digital sensors in farming is something that's going on today. They're used to measure the soil, they're used to measure the whole environment around the particular crops. Irrigation, because water is such a big part of sustainable agriculture, there's watering systems now that can use the least amount of water and put water exactly where it needs to be. And speaking of targeting, drones are becoming a very useful tool in agriculture because not only can they monitor, but drones can go to a particular area of a crop and spray or inspect, and they can target specific areas so that you're not using water or you're not using chemicals across an entire field. You're putting it in just the right place. Now, biotechnology, this is a very fast and developing area. And it's actually something that's not new. When I looked into biotechnology and how it's been done by various means for centuries. It's just that things like CRISPR-Cas9, which we've talked about on this show, has been able to improve disease resistance, yield for crops, and we've been able to do this much faster and more accurately than we have with centuries-old processes that we've used for creating the kind of crops that we want. But it's not just high tech, and it's not just in the developed world where this is handling. So I was looking into what kind of sustainable agricultural practices are going on in other countries. So I was looking at Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the dairy industry there, and a concept called dairy hubs to bring cows together in such a way as that the smaller farms can utilize their resources together better, provide healthier feed and water for the cows, and produce more milk. So they're producing more milk while using fewer of the resources in the area. Fertilization practices, something called fertilizer deep placement, is something that's being done so that we have less evaporation, less wash away of fertilizer. So not only is it better for the runoff that's coming from the fields, but it's also better for the plants. Now, in Malaysia, where where the show is being hosted from, there is a mobile app that's being used for paddy farming from a company called Agritech, and it's being sponsored by the government to be able to provide needed information for paddy cultivation to make it more efficient and more symbolic. And the name of the app, if you want to go look at it, it's called My Paddy Manager, and it's available on the Apple Store and it's available on Google. And there are others. Once you go there, you'll see that there's various others. But the point is, it's a way of using information technology to be able to use those resources once again much more effectively. Coming tomorrow are new forms of improvement that will be driven by big data, artificial intelligence, probably on the back end of some of these mobile apps, and maybe with the tie-in from satellite imagery to be able to once again make agriculture, farming more efficient. But there'll also be some other interesting ways too. Hydroponics, aeroponics, and aquaponics are three technologies that are starting to scale. I've seen them used actually here in Phoenix in urban farms, and now I've seen these three technologies starting to be used on a larger scale. So hydroponics is no soil, using all of these are using nutrient-rich solutions. Aeroponics, it's a nutrient-rich aerosol. Matter of fact, this was originally designed by NASA for spaceflight so that they could grow sustainable crops on long space trips. And then aquafarming, aquaponics, using plants and fish together and use that symbiotic relationship to be able to grow crops. And these can all be grown indoors, which reduces the needs of pesticides. They can be, and evaporation. So we have some interesting things coming for the future. So we have what's going on in the world in general, in some specific developing countries, and also interesting innovations in that are coming in the future. So there's a broad brush of what's going on from the innovation standpoint. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Smith.
Sharif, you yet again have come up with a fantastic topic, and David did a great job of going through the definition of sustainable architecture and the fact that not just the United States has their own definition of this that is written into law, but many other countries do as well, which I've seen there. And it really gets back to looking at what are the methods that can be used, what's the science that can be used, what are the various elements that come together. And it's also is how do we protect the environment? How do we maintain the fertility of the soil, and how do we take care of the natural resources around it? But it's also beginning to look even beyond that, because we know that agriculture needs to be economically profitable for the farmers. And so the ability to let the farmers produce their crops and others is actually part of sustainable architecture. And the promotion of the environmental stewardship is great, but also sustainable agriculture has a place where it increases the welfare for the population, the welfare for the farmers, their communities, their animals, and uh, trying to look at that sustainability all the while trying to meet the needs for humans. And you really need to see that there's other alternatives to it there. But I think it's important to kind of step back and look at some of the broader topics in it. You often hear me talk about how everything's a system, and we're in a time of systems by systems. And sustainable agriculture, David, you have me going there. Sustainable agriculture is the same thing because it goes across not just the food plant, but also food security. It goes about biofuels are part of it, how you do a controllable agricultural architecture, cooperatives, cover crops, waste management of all different types, from dairy waste management to how you recycle the leftovers from when you are harvesting your crops as you're planting. How can you put energy efficiency and conservation into a sustainable agriculture way? You know, how do we get enough people to work in that industry? Farming and agriculture has had a great outflow of human capital as technology and other things have stepped up their place. Now, there's a great debate in sustainable architecture over the how you label the food. Is it organic? Is it all the different areas there? How do you label it? How do you modify it? Are genetically modified crops part of sustainable architecture or not? I can keep on going. There's a really neat area of science called biologically integrated farming systems. And this is one of the places where the growth of sensors, artificial intelligence, and using a concept of digital twins, even for a sustainable agriculture, is really picking up things. Integrated pest management. I could keep on going, and even looking at how you use water, how you do zero emissions as you're farming, and the value-based supply chains are very important as we look at the future of sustainable agriculture. So again, it's a very broad area that you can do a lot with, but it's one that's important to us, and it's one that has global impacts. Just like our climate crisis has a global impact, the approach to sustainable agriculture does too, because even though last year the global population growth slowed down, we're still seeing that growth, and we're seeing the need to have a sustainable agriculture to support the population, even though fewer and fewer people are actually involved in farming and producing those outputs today. So that to me is my initial comments.
It's Mr. Rob.
Well, I grew up on a ranch and a farm. The difficulties in keeping both operating were problematic. The ranch I grew up on was an orange ranch, and it was in California, back when California was heavy into oranges. And then a disease came through the state called quick decline and wiped them out. A lot of us kind of thought at the time, or at least a lot of our parents thought at the time, because I was young when it happened, that Florida, who was competing with California for orange crops, had planted the quick decline in our state. There haven't been any proof of that, but it showcased the vulnerability of crops to diseases, because quick decline traveled from orchard to orchard and pretty much wiped out the orange producing capability of the state. All the groves that I grew up with are gone now, and that was the reason. Then on farms, my uncle, on the last days of his life, ran the family farm outside of Modesto in California, and he got pancreatic cancer a very aggressive form of pancreatic cancer, and he died looking about the size he probably was when he was 7 or 8. I mean, the cancer just ate him alive, and the cause of the cancer was the pesticides. They hadn't properly controlled or contained the pesticides. In fact, the number of people that died in that area of that kind and various types of cancer was unusually high because the pesticides had gotten into the food chain. At least that was the theory, gotten into the food chain and into the wells, and the end result was the farmers were poisoning themselves. Not to mention the food that was being grown on those farms, particularly cattle and sheep, were undoubtedly contaminated by the pesticides as well. And so, as we move to this concept of sustainable farming, the concept is appealing because it addressed two of the problems that I just indicated. One, if it's a contained vertical farming like AeroFarms does, the entire process is contained and controlled, and the use of pesticides is largely eliminated. The demonstration that I saw in AeroFarms is backed by Intel and Dell Technologies, and they've been able to showcase they can get about 390 times the yield per square foot that a more traditional farm gets using AeroFarms. And the last demonstration I saw, which was pretty interesting, even though they were growing bell peppers and tomatoes, two products that I absolutely hate, was they kept offering me, "Hey, do you want to try one yet?" No. What they were using is instead of pesticides, they were actually using insects. They had aphids that were released by computer when there was mold detected, and the aphids would eat the mold. And then as the aphids multiplied and became a problem for the crops, they would release ladybugs, who then would eat the aphids. And the typical problem in using ladybugs for aphid control is the fact that ladybugs kind of go wherever they want. They may not stay with the area that you want to remove the aphids, but in a controlled and contained environment, they do, because they have no place else to go. So the AeroFarms are a contained vertical farm, and that's how they get this extreme production jump per square foot of farming. And they control the light, they control the water. Water is a fraction of what it would be in a regular farm. You don't have to worry about clouds, storms, water shortages, droughts, or any of that stuff, because you contain it all in the production process. And so you have assured production for a period of time at a very high level, and the food that's coming out is not contaminated by pesticides because they don't use pesticides, and diseases don't come in because the place is contained and controlled as you come into the site. The only way you could bring in a disease is someone breached protocol and came in contaminated, which is possible, but a lot less likely than the airborne contagions that took out the orange crops in California with quick decline. So it's a way to deal at scale with both the problems of climate change and the reduction of arable land, and the issues that have been created with regard to pesticides, without necessarily having to re-engineer the plant life itself. You can, and clearly that would increase yields even higher, but it's a way to perhaps protect the purity of the food throughout the production cycle, and then provide a much higher yield per square foot. And of course, the underlying concept is you could put these things in cities, addressing what we're now seeing with the war in Ukraine is a serious logistics problem with regard to being able to deliver food across borders during times of conflict. The amount of wheat and food that Ukraine delivers to the world is significant, particularly to the Western world is significant. And of course, that food is not able to get out of the Ukraine right now because Russia's blockading the state. And so and they're going to try to run a blockade busting group of warships through there. At least that's my understanding at this point, which is probably going to escalate things rather badly in that war, but they don't have any choice because that's the only way they're going to get the food out. So by going to these vertically integrated factory farms, you can provide food that can be produced more locally to the people that are going to consume it. So it's going to be fresher. You can produce it at far higher quantities, arguably at lower cost, and the food is healthier for the people that consume it. So it showcases that we are on the path to perhaps solving one of the biggest problems the world's going to face thanks to climate change, and that's the loss of arable land. Though we would need to ramp this capability ahead of the arable land fallout, and certainly employ people in region that have lost their farms and that are now unable to make a living because the arable land where they were growing things is no longer viable. So it could be a significant way to both address the health issues that the world suffers through, as well as the significant food shortages that the world is constantly trying to overcome in a very effective, efficient fashion that produces a high quality product that is far healthier than the products we have in the market today. So it is the promise of a better future for ourselves and our children. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the future advancements in this area, realizing, of course, it does address that one big problem we're seeing now is because it puts the production closer to consumption. It does help solve the massive logistics problems we don't only have in Ukraine, but with a shortage in trucking and truckers right now. It exists here in the States and undoubtedly other parts of the world where they're experiencing similar shortages. So it's a big potential solution to some critical problems we have now, and I'd like to see it advance faster than it is.
Thank you, sir. Amanda from Malaysia. So what you want to share about Malaysian agricultural present situation? And
Sure.
she is a very good writer. I think recently she published a lot of article in the paper, and you work as a policymaker, right? Policy researcher.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Sharif. So basically, recently I researched about food security, and actually, I write about community farming. So basically, right, to relate to today topic, basically, what the previous panelists mentioned is good idea is that it's good for us to move towards vertical farming, but in Malaysia case, I think we need the combination of both urban farming and also community farming. Maybe you all wonder like what is the meaning of community farming? So community farming basically is try to use the underutilized land, turn the land into like the soil where we can plant the vegetables and fruits. So when the land is become soilable, at least we can like utilize the land to plant more veggie and plant more foods, and also like solve the local food security issue. And like why I say Malaysia require both method, like both urban farming and also the community farming, because Malaysia, although it's like 70% of the population is like urbanized, but we still have some population who stay in rural area or semi-rural area. So if let's say they stay in rural or semi-rural, and then their surrounding have some land that can plant the veggie or foods, then it will be good. And then it's like to make this urban farming and community farming to be workable, we also require the government financial incentive, because in Malaysia, basically there is lack of financial incentive to upgrade the skills and upgrade the technology application, and even the money to like how to say pay off the labor and also like the storage or the packaging facility. So if let's say the government they can be supportive in terms of providing some tax incentive and in terms of the grant, then Malaysia is able to move towards sustainable agriculture. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Amanda, I have another questions to you because I think you are closely working with different politicians in Malaysia. Am I right? Like you have some experience, work closely with different federal government or state government agencies. So how they develop policy, especially for agriculture?
Okay, so actually for myself, I was in Ministry of Health and Ministry of Youth and Sport in Sabah, Malaysia before. It belongs to the state ministry, not really the federal ministry. But For the agriculture wise, I think it's important to work with the city council and also the Ministry of Housing and Local Government and Ministry of Agriculture, of course. And also, we need to work with some like think tanks. Like my think tank actually recently quite advocate in food security, so I think my think tank can be part of it. And also like some academias, like for instance, Malaysia have one University Putra Malaysia, who which is like specialized into agriculture, so we can utilize their expertise to like uh to let them provide the government some suggestion like how to build sustainable agriculture. And there is one private university in Malaysia, which is Sunway University. They also can provide some ideas like how to make Malaysia to be self-sustained in food production, especially.
Thank you. Mr. Saleh, you are from Bangladesh and you are also from academy. Bangladesh heavily dependent on agriculture. What's going on inside Bangladesh? What is happening? How they are taking different initiative for improvement for their agriculture?
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Sharif. It's my pleasure to have all of you here, and I have been listening the lectures from the distinguished guest here. So I would like to express my my knowledge regarding the agricultural practice in terms of Bangladesh. So first of all, as you know that we are a very heavily densely populated country, and we have nearly 18 1.8 billion people here in Bangladesh, but we have a very small land. But despite having the fact that we accept this challenge, and we are trying our level best to maintain the food security for the people, and we are able to produce the necessary foods that are being available for the country people as well. So, like as you know, we have some specialized agricultural universities in Bangladesh. Like for example, Bangladesh Agricultural University. They have some innovations regarding food security and ensuring the how the modern types of agricultural farming can be happen. But as we all know that we have some lackings in the terms of technological intervention in the agricultural projects. For example, we can introduce more technological innovations in there. As one of our guests have said, that using drone in putting water or putting fertilizer in the agricultural land, that hasn't been available in my country. But yes, it could be happen in the coming future as well. In terms of sustainable agriculture, I must say that we have had the traditions of practicing sustainability before the concept arise. When went to my local villages, and I saw in my childhood that they, they practiced vermicompost in my local area, which is now one of the very lucrative techniques in sustainable agriculture as well. So vermicompost was there, and another thing about the using fertilizer that is made out of the like cow dung or from the leaf of the trees. So that was there, but now it is growing, and people are engaging more chemical fertilizer instead of such organic fertilizer. So now we the main challenge is to ensure the food security for a highly densely populated country like Bangladesh. So, but we are seeing some revolutions in terms of using more vermicompost, more agriculture, more fertilizers that has been made out of the organic ways. And also, we have seen urban agriculture as well. We have seen more vertical farming and horizontal farming in Dhaka city as well. And I myself doing verticulture. Vertical agriculture in my own house. So it is practicing and it is growing. So it may take time to ensure this sort of sustainability practice, but at the same time we need more knowledge sharing platforms on the usage of such sustainability practice in terms of urban agriculture as well. As we know that agriculture is such a vital thing that actually connects lots of SDGs, or like maybe from all SDGs as well, from SDG 1 to SDG 17. And one of our guests has said that she is doing research on sustainable community, so that is strongly related with SDG 11. Using sustainability agricultural, that can also highly interrelated with SDG 13, that is life, the climate change, and SDG 14, life below water, and SDG 15, life on land. And as well, the sustainable agriculture also ensure the good health and well-being, SDG 3. So I have cite some examples in terms of SDG things. So yes, so sustainability practices in agriculture, it actually it would improve our quality of work life as well. So thank you so much. Hope we will discuss more in coming time. Thank you.
Thank you. Uh, Mr. David Shubakar, you get some insight from developing world, like from Malaysia and from Bangladesh. So how we can develop better policy for agriculture, or how we can transfer technology and do more research on agricultural industry.
Well, I think the Malaysian government recognizes that from what I read, because they are a sponsor of this program that I was talking about earlier. And I think from what Amanda was saying, that they need the government subsidies, but probably also maybe even education or whatever that may come from the government to be able to help. And I think that's going to require us opening ourselves up to new ideas. Rob, I really enjoyed your story about oranges, not because of what happened in California, but because I remember when California was dominant in oranges. As a matter of fact, I was taking a trip some decades ago down through the central corridor of Florida and stopped for breakfast at a roadside restaurant. And the orange juice there was just amazing. And I mentioned to the waitress at the time how good it was to be in Florida and get some Florida orange juice. When she brought me my bill, she brought me the container that the California orange juice came in. So I'm sitting in the middle of orange groves in Florida drinking California orange juice, which just shows how dominant I think California was at the time for price and being able to distribute. But that went away essentially in the blink of an eye because of disease. So this is where I think that genetically modifying is going to be exceptionally important. Yes, growing crops indoors is something that we want to do. And I'm seeing it done on small scales, even here in my local community in the desert. And I do see it scaling, and I do see that as a way towards the future. But we will be growing crops outside somewhere for the foreseeable future. And when we do that, we need to have some type of pest control. We need to do what we can to reduce water. We need to do what we can to increase yield. And I think we're seeing some very encouraging signs with genetic modification of crops. As time goes forward and we experience more of the effects of global warming and increased population pressures, I think these things are going to become very important. So I would hope that that would be something that we would see coming from not only governments here where I live, but also in your part of the world, in Malaysia and Bangladesh, and maybe even doing a better job of getting ahead of the curve, because you don't have the large corporations that we have here that are fairly well set in their ways. So maybe there's an advantage there for Malaysia and all of this, Sharif.
Yes, thank you, sir. Mr. David Smith.
Sharif, I Love the diversity of what we're hearing in today's program, and I particularly like the approaches of looking at really vertical agriculture and others. Uh, but as we look at sustainable agriculture, there's also a whole area called alternative agriculture that's built into it as well. And some of the approaches like the vertical agricultural and organic agriculture and others have given rise to other science-based approaches. One of them is called regenerative agriculture, and it focuses on reversing the degradation of the farmland, the soil. And one of the views of this regenerative agriculture is it lessens the impacts of climate change and it restores the biodiversity of the soil. I can tell you, living in cities, even though when I grew up we had a farm about 80, 90 miles from the city I lived in, uh, seeing how the soil has changed so much over time and how even in my small gardens here, I realize I have to dramatically supplement the soil because of it's degraded the more I grow plants and nutrients are pulled out of it. There's another sustainable architecture, agricultural approach called permaculture. And it's a system in which all the parts, including people, animals, the natural resources, the land, and the environment, are put in a model that they can coexist permanently. And it's really modeled after nature's ability to thrive by a no waste system. And in the places where there is not a large population, and it's brought into bear there. It's also, I think, important to contrast sustainable agricultural versus industrialized agriculture, because industrialized agriculture has really dominated the production in the United States and many other countries around the world since the Industrial Revolution. And it's really characterized by large farms with large tracts of land planted with one crop, extensive use of fertilizers and pesticides, and an emphasis on a selected few crops that are used for both the production of processed food and animal feed. And the sustainable agriculture is actually beginning to go the other way. And that saying, how can we do it? How can we begin to use sustainable agriculture to be good with the environment and others? Because industrial agriculture is a driving force between water pollution, soil degradation, and air pollution. And even when you look at the animal part of industrial agriculture, uh, you're seeing a lot of its waste and things slipping into the groundwater, and particularly the phosphorus out of the waste, and it's causing the overgrowth of algae in many places around where you see the large concentration of farm animals and doing it. And so that is some of the big differences in those areas. And you can just see the benefits everywhere for both the animals, for the environment, the local economy, and the workers, uh, and for public health. And so those are just some of the other elements that put into it and are made up of it. And it really is a system. And it's uh, most of us do not understand. I remember, much like Rob did, but mine was walking behind a tractor as we were baling hay and beginning to take those big bales of hay, throw them up on the truck behind it, going taking them into the barn, and hoping that you don't see rats as big as dogs in there, among all the hay, and really spending time around the ponds where you got to see a microcosm of life from the animals which you had on your farm to visitors and a collection of snakes that was fun to take and force them out of their underground cocoons and catch them. So it's this whole circle of life, to take the line from the movie. And that's what you really see what sustainable agriculture is trying to do. It's trying to bring that circle of life back approach into the agricultural ecosystem and supplement it by the different ways we can make it sustainable, particularly in urban environments where we've lost the ability to do much of any type of agriculture in an urban environment. So those are kind of my thoughts there.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rob.
Well, agriculture is one of the biggest problems we have right now. I'm going to give you an idea. We've got water shortages, a lot of water shortages in my part of the country, and they're severe. And to give you an idea, one 5-pound bag of sugar requires 88 gallons of water to produce. And put that in perspective, at trying to conserve water, I've gone from 300 gallons a day to 100 gallons a day by completely redesigning my yards and landscaping, moving from sprinklers to drip and everything else. And still, if you look at agriculture, it's still consuming a massive amount of water for fruits and vegetables. A lot of the farms use flood irrigation, which is incredibly wasteful. And because you're outdoors, you have to deal with not only the pests, but evaporation. You can't keep the water close to the crops. So when you've got a water shortage, farming exacerbates it, and that's just the consumption of water. That's not the amount of water that gets contaminated by fertilizer and pesticide runoff, and that's significant as well. So the trying to get a handle on how to produce fruits and vegetables more sustainably with water reuse, without polluting the water, with making sure the water goes where you need it to go and not every place else, becomes a major path to solving the water shortage problems that a number of countries, including my state, is experiencing. In fact, California is in deep trouble at the moment, and once again, largely due to the fact that much of its water has to be imported. And the places where it's being imported from are drying up, which is kind of problematic. And now that to mitigate that, California started to build desalination plants on the coast, but the amount of water we're talking about is so great, it's unlikely the desalination approach is going to be affordable long term. It would be much better to go down a path of eliminating these extreme water use industries, with farming coming to the top of that particular list, or at least modifying them to a degree where their water use is no longer as critical or as destructive as it currently is. So the path to a more sustainable future, at least with regard to farming, really goes down this path of rethinking and re-engineering farms so they consume less water, consume less material. And if we move out of fruits and vegetables into cattle farming, which has an extreme impact on the environment, both from the release of methane gas from the cows due to the food they eat. And we know we can solve that problem not necessarily by getting rid of cattle farming, but just changing the food that they consume. But the food that they consume right now is also very water intensive, and so it has an exacerbating impact on the entire ecosystem. It really is time that we went back and looked at agriculture hard and recognized that it is as much a solution to the problem of world hunger as it is a creator of a problem for world hunger, because it is over consuming natural resources as we are now doing it. And so we need to fix that in order to get around the critical problems we've got with world hunger and increasing problems with the quality of food. Our food quality at least appears to be degrading over time, and degrading rather significantly. And so And that, of course, has exacerbating impacts on healthcare costs, longevity, productivity, the overall implications of not securing and assuring our food supply are significant for the growth of any nation, and so should be a much higher priority in every nation than it currently is. And we have the science. This isn't something we don't have the science to fix. We do. It's just a case of prioritizing budgets and making sure that the money is flowing where it is most needed, and is able to correct these problems before they become so critical that we have much larger food-oriented social issues than we currently have. The great migrations that are currently occurring from outside our country into our country is one of the issues that is being created by these farming shortfalls. A lot of these people are fleeing climate problems because the places where they're working are no longer sustainable, and unless you can make them sustainable, they're going to keep coming. And the countries that are getting these refugees are reaching a point where they can't handle them. And of course, the war in Ukraine is exacerbating the entire mess. So in the end, this is one of the areas where a little more could have a huge impact on the health of the world and planet and the population they're in. And it is an incredibly important subject and an area of study, and very becoming much more technologically capable. It's interesting to point out that a lot of the advances are now being done because we don't have the people to manage some of these large farms, which is resulting in automation and rethinking of how we're doing it. But we need to get ahead of that curve, because we don't necessarily want to just simply automate inefficient farms, which could a path that could actually exacerbate some of the other issues. We need to redesign the farms so they consume less in terms of resources. And until we do so, we will never get our arms around some of the major issues that developed and developing nations are currently experiencing with regard to food supply and quality.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Talib Raphael, we are discussing on sustainable agriculture. So long term, you actually play a very important role in UN WTO. So what is your advice for sustainable agriculture?
I want to speak from a developing country point of view. My country, for example, Jordan, it was the breadbasket of the world during the days of the Romans. Today, we're importing everything. We don't produce anything. With the Russian-Ukrainian crisis, we're suffering a lot. And that's not right. I believe that every country should be independent. Every country that has limited borders should be independent in terms of food supply. That's a very important element, because we are not allowed to become independent now. We have to be dependent on Russia, Ukraine, and many, many other world powers, which is not right. Now, how do we deal with that? I think what Rob said is very important. We need to be up to speed with technology, because with the consumption of water is a problem in our part of the world, as you all know. The Jordan Valley now is being dried up. The Israelis are consuming a lot of water in their land. But we can't measure that with our own scale of water consumption. The awareness of that is also very critical. For example, when we wash our cars, we use lots of water. We don't think about it. We think water is limitless. Water is a problem. And the management of water is a serious problem. We have to be technologically adept to do that. That's what I wanted to say for the time being. Thank you so much, Sharif.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Amanda?
You mean, is there anything I want to add on, is it?
Yeah, definitely, because Dr. Talib bring an important point, and our other speaker brings some important strategy. What's your view from Malaysia?
Okay, sure. So basically, right, beside the water security and the food security, I think the energy security also quite important. Because some things like, especially for example, the fertilizer. There are some ingredients we need to use the energy to produce the ingredients in order to like come out the fertilizer, and then it's like because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict make the energy price rise up. So basically the fertilizer will rise up. So when the fertilizer rise up the cost, that means the farmers actually face higher cost of production. So when the time they are facing higher cost of production, how they can uh do the agriculture sustainably also a question, because not sure whether they have the money to hire like labor to assist, or whether they have money to employ the technology in order to improve the agriculture production. So this is part of the question. And then it's like for just now some speakers I remember they mentioned also the land actually is like there are less and less nutrient inside, because it is due to climate change. So it's like in order to make the land more fertile, and it's like make it able to do the food production against, it's like you definitely need to, how to say, regenerate the soil content in order to make it how to say, more nutritious for the land. Then only you can plant the veggie and the food, so it will also like take some process. So I think for the sustainable agriculture, right, we maybe cannot see within 1 to 2 months, but maybe we can see the result only like 6 months or a year, because it's like we need the technology, we need the skills, we also need the labor, and also need the environment to make it more sustainable.
Thank you. Mr. Arman.
Okay, so thank you so much. So, one issue has been arised about by the respective discussant is that the consumption of the food. Yes, so this is a very vital thing in terms of assuring the sustainability in the agricultural perspective. So, as I have discussed before, that I'm from Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is a highly densely populated country, and for food security is always challenging, and we often have to make some trade-off between using the chemical fertilizer and the green fertilizer and so on. So using the sustainable practice like in farming is somewhat challenging. But at the same time, cocoa consumption is also a challenging factor at this moment. So during the SDG 12, that is the sustainable consumption and production. So I would really like to draw to the fact that we as a consumer have to be more conscious about consuming the particular product. In the terms of discussing sustainable agriculture, we also have to think about the fact that we should promote the cultivating our native plants. As we know, the native plants or the um, native species of the food is good for the for particular environment. It is a safe for the or sharing the biodiversity and the ecosystem of a particular country. So if we impose foreign foods in agricultural items in our agricultural things. So it also creates some adverse impact in the agricultural effect as well. So as we know that we have to be sure that our native food space should be more priorities, and we as a consumer have to be more conscious in this fact that, and the same time in terms of taking the food security, only the food that is suitable for the climate of a particular country, it should be highly appreciated. And at the same time, we have discussed here about the consumption of water. Yes, so water water everywhere, but not a drop of rain. Yes, we know that there are 3 parts of water and 1 part of land, but in terms of using the agricultural land and water, it is very limited. So we have a very limited amount of water. So we have to be conscious about using water, and we have to find out the way that how to reduce the water usage in our agricultural field. As in Bangladesh, rice is one of the biggest cultivating products in terms of agriculture. So rice production involves lots of water. So it is the duty, or it is the new thinking of the agricultural scientists to find out that how to reduce the usage of water in agricultural perspective, because water is scarce. We have to be more concerned about this aspect as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to go for the concluding remarks for today's session. Dr. Talib Rafael, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Thank you. My concluding remarks are very political in some ways. I think countries have to become independent in their needs for food. It's a very important precondition. Every country must realize this in the world. Superpowers of the world cannot monopolize the food of the world and control it the way they do now. Now, the issue of water is another important issue. It's connected to climate change, of course, but it is also a matter of how powerful a country is controlling these water supplies. And we are a living example of that in Jordan. We can't get the water that we deserve. We were the breadbasket of the world, as I said. Now we're importing wheat. We have to import wheat. The cost of importing wheat is very, very high. And bread is a very important element in our food. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. David Schwager, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Yeah, I want to say that I think that I see lots of potential for the technologies that I talked about. We'll see incremental technologies as we make things the way they are now better. But I think the use of gathering data, whether it be by sensors that are in the land or sensors for drones or even satellite imagery, feeding those into data banks and being able to use analytics to determine what's really important and to be able to target and then to build on these technologies can take us out of incremental improvements and potentially give us exponential improvements as we build technology upon technology. So it's probably not surprising to anyone that I think that's an area that I really want to see go forward, and it needs to be endorsed by governments, and we need to be able to see that it's making real help to the farmers and to the communities they serve. So that's the comments I'll leave you with today.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Smith.
Well,
What's
since
your
Rob needs to drop off, why don't we let him go next?
Okay. Oh, sorry, Mr. Rob.
Yeah, I agree with Taleb. Every nation needs to control its food supply. That's critical. The Ukraine war is showcasing the interdependence between nations is a fragile thing, and while it can help preserve the peace, the inability for a country to get the food its population needs is a critical problem, and in my opinion, a failure in government. And the way to fix this problem now in areas that don't have enough farming capacity is to move to the next level of technology and build these vertical farms and assure the food supply. Things are undoubtedly going to get worse as climate change advances, and solving this problem sooner as opposed to later is probably going to be critical for the viability of the state. So an important topic and an area that we should be talking about perhaps more often than we are. And thank you much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Smith.
I agree with everything that's been said in these concluding remarks that this is a critical challenge for the future of our humanity, and that we need to balance using science and technology as part of sustainable agriculture, and we need to balance good practices of how we can be a shepherd to the environment and the earth using techniques that are not so enriched in science. I know in my part of Texas, we are going back to more and more of our heritage vegetables and heritage plants as opposed to
The
some
United
of the
States has become very overextended.
breeds of that.
We're overextended
And
militarily.
we're seeing that happen quite a bit. So it's a balancing act, and it's one that is up to both those of us who've been involved many years in looking at the problems and the challenges, such as myself, Dr. Talib, David, and others. And it's up to the younger ones, like the other two people on this broadcast today, to really champion it across the generations. Because each of our generations that are there today, and we have more than 6 generations in the workforce today, all have different views of how to look at sustainable agriculture. We have a rural view versus a city's view of how to look at sustainable agriculture. And we need to balance all those and learn what we can from each of the views and put them together to create a greater good for all. So that's my concluding remarks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Saleh. Amanda, what you want to add as a concluding remarks?
Actually, I just want to conclude that I think this food security issue will happen quite a while. But if we start to do something, like maybe start to how to say using like the container to pack up your lunch or dinner is like not using the plastic bag, then it can help to save the environment. And then also like if possible, it's like if you have some empty space nearby your home, maybe you can plant some vegetable so you can sustain yourself, and then it will help the country to boost the local production. And also like when the government also supportive enough in terms of the agriculture initiative, I think the small farmers will eventually benefit from the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Agriculture is very important. Food security is important. I can say that every country's right now food price is increasing. Beside that, food safety and security is agricultural safety and security is very important for all of the country, both for developed nations and for developing nations. I think we need to work hard. We have to work together, and we have to develop better policy for all over the world. Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher, Mr. David Smith, Mr. Arman, uh, uh, Dr. Talib Raphael, Madam Amanda for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible with your government agencies, with corporations, and with academia. And I just want to share that next year, March 27 to 29, we have a very important conference, Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. We are inviting many scientists from around the world. It will be in India, but you can join in online, both in online and offline. And those who want to publish paper, you can. We have our website. I already share with our audience. You can submit your paper. So this is the way we can develop a knowledge-based society. That is our commitment. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Bye.